day my granddaughter was born was supposed to be the happiest day I'd had in years. I stood at the window of Mercy General's maternity ward on the 4th floor, looking down at the parking lot below, watching the February sleet come in sideways off Lake Erie. I was 63 years old, retired from 31 years as a civil engineer with the county. My wife, Eleanor, had passed 2 years prior from pancreatic cancer, which took her in 11 weeks from diagnosis to burial. 11 weeks. I still can't say that number without feeling it somewhere behind my sternum. But that morning my son called me from inside the delivery room and said, "Dad, she's here, come on back." And I walked down that hallway, and I held a 7-pound, 2-ounce baby girl named Rosie. And for the first time since Eleanor's funeral, I felt something crack open in my chest in a way that didn't hurt. That was 18 months before I found the paperwork. My son's name is Owen. My son is 34 years old and has his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a combination that has gotten him into trouble his entire life. He married a woman named Tamsin 6 years ago at a vineyard outside of Charlottesville. She was pretty and sharp and laughed loudly at dinner parties, and Eleanor never fully trusted her. I thought Eleanor was being protective the way mothers are protective of sons. I told her that. I wish I hadn't. Tamsin's family had money, not old money, the kind that gets made fast in real estate and gets talked about louder than it deserves. Her father, a man named Richfield, ran a property management company out of Charlotte that had done well during the housing boom, and badly since, very badly as it turned out, but I didn't know that yet. After Eleanor passed, I sold the house in Mentor, Ohio, where we'd raised Owen. 4 bedrooms, corner lot, the oak tree in the backyard that Owen fell out of at age 9 and broke his collarbone. I sold it because I couldn't walk past Eleanor's garden every morning without it hollowing me out. The sale netted me $412,000 after everything. I put it in a money market account at the credit union, and I didn't touch it. I moved into a rental apartment 15 minutes from Owen and Tamsin's place in Westlake, so I could be near Rosie. That was the plan: be near Rosie, be useful, keep going. For a year it worked. I watched Rosie on Tuesdays and Thursdays, while Tamsin said she was doing consulting work, which I later learned meant she was managing what remained of her father's collapsing business from her laptop at a coffee shop. Owen was traveling 3 weeks out of 4 for his job. He's in supply chain logistics. He was rarely home. I didn't think anything of it. I was grateful for the time with my granddaughter. Rosie would fall asleep on my chest, and I would sit very still and not move for an hour because I didn't want to wake her, and also because it was the only time the apartment felt quiet in a good way, instead of an empty one. Then one Tuesday in October, Tamsin asked me to sign some paperwork. She set it on my kitchen table while Rosie was napping. A stack of maybe 8 pages, paper clipped. She said it was related to setting up a family trust. She said Owen had meant to tell me about it, but had forgotten, and they'd gotten an extension from the attorney, but really needed it done this week. She put a pen next to the stack. I asked if I could read it first. She laughed, not unkindly, just quickly, and said of course, but it was pretty standard language, boilerplate really, and the attorney had explained everything to Owen already. I said I'd read it anyway. The look that crossed her face lasted less than 2 seconds. But I spent 31 years reviewing infrastructure contracts for the county. I know what it looks like when someone doesn't want you to read something. I read it. It took me 20 minutes. Rosie woke up halfway through, and Tamsin took her into the living room, which gave me the rest of the time alone. It was not a family trust document. It was a durable financial power of attorney that, if signed, would give Tamsin, not Owen, Tamsin alone, full legal authority over my financial accounts, investment decisions, and real property. There was a clause in the 3rd addendum, written in the kind of language that's designed to be skipped, that authorized her to act on my behalf without notification to me in cases where I was deemed unavailable or incapacitated. I am 63 years old. I go to the gym 4 days a week. I am not incapacitated. I set the pen down. I walked into the living room and I told Tamsin that I wanted to have my own attorney look it over before I signed anything. I kept my voice even. I have a gift for that. Eleanor used to call it my county meeting voice. I told Tamsin it was nothing personal, just how I handled documents of this nature. She said that was completely fine. Of course, take all the time I needed. She left with Rosie 40 minutes later. She was pleasant about it. She hugged me at the door. Rosie waved from the car seat. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a woman named Adele Machete, who had been Eleanor's closest friend for 30 years and who happened to be a retired estate attorney. The second was to my credit union, to ask a general question about how a durable power of attorney would interact with my existing accounts. The credit union put me on hold for 6 minutes. When the representative came back, she told me something interesting. She told me that 3 weeks prior, someone had called the credit union's customer service line, identified themselves as my daughter. I don't have a daughter, and asked general questions about my account type, my balance thresholds, and what documentation would be required to add a secondary account holder. The call had been flagged by the representative, who took it as unusual because the caller didn't know my account number and couldn't verify the security questions. Nothing had been changed, but the call had happened. I thanked her and hung up. I did not call Owen that night. I thought about it. I sat on the edge of my bed at 11:30 and I held my phone and I thought about calling my son and telling him what I'd found. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the 31 years of contract review. Maybe it was Eleanor's voice in the back of my head saying what she'd said about Tamsin at that Charlottesville Vineyard wedding. Something I dismissed as a mother, being a mother. I needed to know how much Owen knew. I called Adele the next morning. I drove to her house in Bay Village and sat at her kitchen table and showed her the document. She read it slowly, the way attorneys read things. Then she put it down and looked at me over her reading glasses. She said, "Leonard, this is not standard estate planning language. Leonard is my name." She said the clause in the 3rd addendum was specifically structured to allow financial action without triggering the standard notification requirements under Ohio law. She said in her experience, documents written this way were designed with a specific purpose in mind, and that purpose was not to protect me. I asked her what purpose it was designed for. She said, to move money. I asked her to help me find out what was going on. She said she'd make some calls. What she found over the next 2 weeks rearranged my understanding of the past 3 years. Tamsin's father's company, Richfield Property Management, had a lien filed against it by a private investment group out of Atlanta for just under $800,000. The lien had been filed 14 months prior, 8 months before Tamsin started watching my granddaughter less and having me watch her more. The company had been in default since the previous spring. Adele also found that Tamsin had consulted with a financial products firm in Cleveland, not an attorney, a financial products firm, about elder financial planning structures 6 months ago. She'd used her own name. She had not told Owen, as far as we could determine. There's a particular kind of anger that doesn't arrive hot. It comes in slow and cold, like groundwater. By the time you feel it, it's already filled up all the low places. I thought about Rosie asleep on my chest. I thought about the way Tamsin had put the pen next to the stack of papers. A small gesture, casual, as if signing were the natural conclusion to a Tuesday morning. I thought about what $412,000 would mean to a family carrying $800,000 in debt. I called Owen on a Thursday night when I knew Tamsin would be at her book club. He answered on the second ring, sounding tired, calling in from a hotel in Memphis. I told him I needed to talk to him about something important. I told him not to mention the conversation to Tamsin before we spoke in person. There was a long pause. He said, "Dad, what's going on?" I told him I'd found some things I needed him to see. He flew home that Sunday. He told Tamsin his return flight had been moved up. He came to my apartment first, before he went home. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table where the document had been placed 8 weeks prior. I set out everything Adele had found, the document, the lien information, the inquiry to the financial products firm, the credit union call log that I'd requested in writing and received the week prior. Owen didn't say anything for a very long time. I want to be honest about what I saw on my son's face. I've thought about it many times since. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't the face of someone caught. It was the face of someone who had been looking away from something they suspected and had just been forced to look directly at it. There's a difference. The distinction matters to me. He said, I didn't know about the power of attorney. I believed him. He said, I knew things with her dad's company were bad. She told me it was being worked out. I believed that, too. What I said next was hard. I said, "Owen, I need to know what you're going to do. Because I love you, and I love Rosie. But I will not allow this to continue, and I need to know that you understand why." He put his head in his hands. We talked for 3 hours. I made coffee. He cried once quickly and then stopped. He asked me what Adele thought the legal exposure was. I told him she believed there was potential liability for attempted financial fraud, depending on intent and what further investigation found, and that the document itself, unsigned, was still evidence of planning. He asked what I wanted to do. I told him that I was not going to sign anything. I was going to have Adele send a formal letter to Tamsin's attorney of record. She'd found one listed in the financial products firm consultation, notifying them that the power of attorney had been reviewed by legal counsel and would not be executed. I told him I was also filing a report with the Ohio Department of Commerce's Division of Financial Institutions, documenting the fraudulent phone call to my credit union. I told him this was happening regardless of what he decided about his marriage. I told him those were two separate things, and I would not conflate them. But I needed him to understand that I was protecting myself, and he could not ask me not to. He didn't ask me not to. Adele sent the letter 4 days later. The response from Tamsin's attorney came back within 48 hours, faster than Adele expected, which she said told her something. The response was brief and denied any improper intent. It described the document as a draft estate planning instrument that had been shared prematurely. It expressed regret for any confusion. Adele read it to me over the phone and then said, "Leonard, they're scared." The Division of Financial Institutions investigation took 11 weeks. I submitted the call log, the document, the lien records Adele had compiled, and a written timeline. I also submitted records of my credit union interactions going back 18 months, because Adele suggested establishing a pattern baseline. Tamsin's attorney reached out twice during the investigation period, both times framing it as an attempt to resolve the family situation. I did not respond. Adele responded on my behalf both times. Owen moved out of the house in November. He took Rosie on alternating weeks. It was brutal and quiet, and I didn't pretend otherwise to him when he asked how I felt about it. I told him it was one of the saddest things I'd ever watched, and I'd watched his mother die in an 11-week window, so that was not a small statement. He understood what I meant. The division investigation concluded with a finding that the phone call to my credit union constituted an attempted fraudulent inquiry under Ohio Revised Code 1349.01, and that the power of attorney document contained provisions that, in the investigator's assessment, exceeded the scope of legitimate estate planning and showed evidence of structured financial exploitation. The finding was referred to the county prosecutor's office. Tamsin's father's company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 6 weeks after the referral. The Atlanta Investment Group was listed as the primary creditor. Tamsin's attorney negotiated with the prosecutor. I was not part of those negotiations. I was asked if I wished to make a victim impact statement, and I said yes, I did. I stood in a conference room at the Justice Center in downtown Cleveland on a Tuesday in late February, exactly 16 months after I'd held Rosie in the maternity ward, and I read from 2 pages I had typed at my kitchen table. I didn't talk about the money. I talked about what it felt like to sit in my apartment on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons watching my granddaughter fall asleep, believing I was part of a family. Believing that the worst thing that had happened to me was already behind me. I talked about what it is to be 63 and a widower, and to have the one thing keeping you oriented get reframed as a transaction. I didn't cry. I have a county meeting voice. Tamsin received a deferred prosecution agreement, 18 months of supervised financial reporting, mandatory restitution of legal costs incurred, and a permanent record of the finding accessible to financial institutions. No prison time. I won't pretend I wasn't angry about that. I won't pretend the anger has fully passed. But here is what I know. My accounts are intact. The money Eleanor and I saved over 30 years of getting up early and working hard and buying store-brand everything when Rosie needed braces. That money is where it belongs. I see Rosie on Tuesdays. Owen drops her off at 7:30 and picks her up at 5. She's 2.5 now and has started calling me Pop, which I did not teach her and which I can't explain except that it's exactly right. She falls asleep on my chest the same way she always did. Owen is in a small apartment in Lakewood. He calls me most evenings on his drive home. We don't always have much to say. Sometimes I just listen to him drive. I didn't save his marriage. That was never mine to save. I saved what I'd built over a lifetime of work, and I saved the honesty between me and my son, and I kept showing up on Tuesdays. Eleanor would have said, "That's enough. That's what you do." I think she was right. I'm starting to believe she was right about most things. I keep coming back to the moment Tamsin set that pen down next to the stack of papers. Such a small thing. The pen was just sitting there, parallel to the edge of the table, like it was the most natural object in the world. Like signing was simply what came next. That's how it works, I think. The people who want something from you rarely announce it. They arrange the furniture of a situation so that doing what they want feels like the obvious next step. You're not being pressured. You're just finishing a sentence someone else started. What stopped me was habit. 31 years of reading contracts before I touched them had made something in my brain that I couldn't turn off even on a quiet Tuesday morning with my granddaughter napping in the next room. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't even suspicion. Not at first. It was just the thing I always did. Read before you sign. Understand before you commit. That habit, accumulated over decades of ordinary professional work, turned out to be the most important thing I owned. I think about that a lot when I think about what I'd want Rosie to understand someday. Not the story specifically, she'll be too young to remember any of this, and I'd rather she grow up not needing to know it. But the underlying thing, the value of building a mind that doesn't skip steps even when the steps feel unnecessary. Intelligence isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about doing the slow, unglamorous work of actually reading the document in front of you. Of asking the question that seems obvious, of not letting social pressure substitute for your own judgment. What Tamsin did came from desperation, I believe that. $800,000 in debt will rewrite a person's moral reasoning faster than almost anything else. I'm not interested in hating her. Hate is heavy, and I've got a granddaughter to carry. But what she did was wrong in the way that matters most. She looked at a grieving 63-year-old man who trusted her family, and she calculated what he was worth. She made a decision based on what was convenient for her, without regard for what it would cost me. That's the kind of choice that compounds. Every step she took to cover the first step required another step, and another, until she was making fraudulent phone calls to my credit union and consulting financial firms about how to move a dead woman's savings. The consequences followed directly from the choices. That's not fate, that's just arithmetic. What carried me through wasn't anger, though I had plenty of it. It was the decision, made quietly at that kitchen table, to handle it right. To call Adele. To document everything. To talk to Owen honestly, instead of blowing the whole thing up in a way that couldn't be undone. There were nights during those 11 weeks of investigation when the easier thing would have been to just transfer the money somewhere else and walk away from all of it. Let it go. Keep the peace, but keeping that kind of peace has a cost, and someone always pays it, and I've reached the age where I know it would have been me. My son is rebuilding something. I watch him do it in the small ways, the evening phone calls, the Tuesday drop-offs, the way he talks to Rosie like she's already the person she's going to become. He made choices during his marriage that he'll have to live with. So did I, for that matter. Years of looking away from things Eleanor saw clearly. We carry those, but we don't have to be defined by them. Rosie calls me Pop. I didn't teach her that. She just decided. That seems right to me. Some things you earn without knowing you're earning them, just by showing up consistently and doing the honest thing when it costs you something. I showed up on Tuesdays. I read the document. I made the calls. That's all it was. And it turned out to be enough.